Hey guys, welcome back to Sceam Me Up Botty. Before we get going in this episode, I need to apologise for the sound quality in the last episode. And I'm kinda raging too, because it was for the Wrath of Khan, and the best, in my opinion, Star Trek movie ever made. But it is what it is, guys. I'm an amateur, new at this stuff. We make mistakes, and I could have avoided that bad sound mistake if I had have just tested the audio recorder. What I did was, I'm recording a lot of podcasts right now, and I'm using the Zoom H4n and a reasonably decent microphone here, but you can feel your fortune on batteries using the Zoom H4n. Great results. A lot of batteries going through it. So Bright Spark here decides, let's get a little cable so we can connect it directly to the mains. Didn't bother my ass checking the sound recording on the recorder, because you're listening to it now. The recording is absolutely phenomenal, even with a reasonably, not even a reasonably priced. This microphone I'm using at the minute, it's that cheap. It doesn't even have a make on it. I think I got it off Amazon for like £20, and or was it Wish, or some of them sites where you can buy, you get what you pay for basically, and this is what this mic is. But it works reasonably well with this recorder. But when I plugged it to the mains, there was this buzz came through, and again, if I had just put a set of headphones into the recorder, would have caught it, would have restarted it again. But it is what it is. It's early days. I'm an amateur at this stuff, and I'm comfortable with making mistakes, because if you get comfortable, I'm not a perfectionist by any stretch, and perfectionism is just an excuse to do nothing. So, you know what? I just screw it, put it up online, and I thought, if anybody's interested in listening to Sceam Me Up Botty, they're not going to let a little bit of bad audio put them off completely. It's you want to hear some of the other stuff I've done over the years. Plus, the best thing about doing that sort of thing is, once you do eventually start getting better at doing your stuff, you'll see the evolution of the creative process. So let's get into this episode with Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. So, legends, there's only a few of you guys so far that are tuning in for this podcast, and I would appreciate it if you'd hit the follow on it, and give me a little review over on iTunes, and I would love you forever. Now, this episode has gone out extremely late, because over the last 2 weeks I put my car on for some repairs, and yes, I took a full 2 weeks for it to come back, and I literally, in the 2 weeks holidays, sitting in my ass watching Netflix and lots of Star Trek, and no car, couldn't get out of the house, even though we're in lockdown anyway. Really shouldn't be getting out unless it's necessary stuff, but sometimes you just need that little bit of movement just to blow out the cobwebs. That's one thing for me, great stress reliever, is to just jump behind the wheel of the car, stick on some vibes, and head off for a completely pointless drive. This episode's lit is because that's what happened tonight. Got the car back on Sunday evening, literally 7:30, 8 p.m. by the time we got it back home, and I had to get up at stupid o'clock for work the next morning, back to the grind. So a lot of mechanical work done on the engine, and I got 4 new tyres put on it today. So I dug out Bon Jovi's Bounce, jumped into the car and off for 2 hours. Just completely pointless drive, just turn up those vibes. Love it. Anyway, let's get into Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Now, Leonard Nimoy only came back for Star Trek 2 because he was promised a death scene for Spock. And of course, if you listened to the last episode, I talked about the part where him and McCoy met other in the engine room, and he did the Vulcan neck pinch on McCoy, knocked him out, and then he did put the mind meld hands to his face and said, remember. Now, when that film was shot, if memory serves me correctly, that was added in as like a little backdoor thing in case things changed before the next film, where they could talk him into coming back or whatnot, or if the film was even going to be a success at this point when they were making Star Trek 2. The poor performance of the motion picture cast a big shadow on it. So Star Trek 2 released, massive success, and of course everybody wanted a sequel to The Wrath of Khan. So Leonard Nimoy is actually directing this movie, and that was the deal for him coming back. Now, forgive me, a Star Trek fan should have this knowledge at the tip of his fingers, but I don't. I think he came back on a 2-movie deal as a director, so I think he directed The Search for Spock and The Voyage Home. Now, something in my head is telling me it was 3 movies, but there's a nagging doubt there that I think it was probably only the 2. But yes, I think the 3-movie thing, where I'm getting at that, is because essentially Star Trek 2, 3 and 4 are like a trilogy. They're almost the one story, and in fact they are very connected in the one story if you really sit down and think about it. But anyway, this came out in 1984. It was written and produced by Harve Bennett. Of course, Gene Roddenberry is kept out of it again. I think that was a good idea for the movies. Roddenberry is very good at television. I love his shows. Well, the majority of them anyway, but whenever it came to the motion picture, he didn't drop the ball, but he made some choices that would have probably worked better on television than it would for a movie. But anyway, in this third film, we pick up pretty much directly after Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. Enterprise is returning to Earth. Some of the crew has been, sent off to other ships, other assignments and whatnot. And Kirk, he's coming to terms with the loss of his best friend. But upon arriving at the space dock, that scene is absolutely fantastic. Like the rise in budget for this movie was definitely very apparent with the whole space dock and the Enterprise actually landing into it. Fantastic, and you see the Starfleet members all stand at the windows, and the Enterprise is coming in with the holes ripped out of it, and there's a woman, she's just like shaking her head. It's just like Kirk's responsible for this again. Like, you can't take the ship without wrecking the place. So no sooner are they back home to Kirk gets a visit from Spock's father, Sarek, and he's, why did you not bring him home? He trusted you. He gave you the thing that was most important to him, which, as we find out in this film, that what they made of the Vulcan neck pinch scenario when he did the mind meld, he actually transferred his Catra over to McCoy, but Sarek thinks that he did it with Kirk. Well, Kirk tells him, when he died, we were separated by two pane of glass. We couldn't touch each other. So Sarek is like, it's unfortunately everything that Spock was is lost. He's gone. But Kirk is like, what, if it was that important, Spock would have found a way. And then they go and check the security footage on the Enterprise. And I always love it in these shows, never to do this and whatnot, TV and movies. And it's basically, it's not security footage you're looking at whatsoever. It's like they've rented out the DVD and they're playing it back. It's the exact shot from the movie where you see Spock coming in and going, remember. So they figure out McCoy has it. And there's a whole problem with getting the crew together. The crew that's going to volunteer to jump onto this mission because it's the Starfleet is against it. They've decided that the Enterprise is far too old. They've decided to decommission it, and the Genesis planet has become a real galactic argument. It's a forbidden planet. Nobody's allowed to go near it and whatnot. So Kirk, McCoy, Scotty, they finally get together and hijack the Enterprise, and Scotty wires it up so that it can be pretty much be manned by a couple of people from the bridge alone, and no crew other than the 4 or 5 that are on the Enterprise. Kirk actually says, me and Dr. McCoy have to do this, but the rest of you, you don't have to get involved in this. You save your career and whatnot. But of course, the bridge crew of the Enterprise, being the absolute legends that they are, I was like, yeah, we're going with you. So the Steel Enterprise finally get it out of space dock, and the new Excelsior starship is, it's supposed to be not the replacement for Enterprise, but it's kind of like whenever they turn up and see this thing, it's like, this is the next generation of starship, and Scotty's like, he's not impressed with it whatsoever, and he's like, Kirk has a huge love affair with the Enterprise, and he gets his own back on the Excelsior and our captain when he disables its transwarp drive, which is, I'm trying to recall off the top of my head. I've watched a lot of Star Trek over the years, but the majority of it was reruns on TV. If I caught it, if not. But the whole transwarp thing with starships, I can't recall that being mentioned much beyond this movie. But anyway, it's basically Enterprise trying to escape, and the captain of Excelsior is like, they're never going to get away. Whenever we've got transwarp drive, like, we're far faster than Enterprise, we can track her down in no time. But basically, when they try to go to warp speed, she just conks out in space, a wee bit like my car. So Enterprise gets off, they head for the Genesis planet, and Kirk's son David is key scientist in the Genesis development. Him and Savick, who is played by Robin Curtis in this film, they're investigating the Genesis planet on board the science vessel Grissom, I want to say. Discovering an unexpected life form from the surface, Marcus and Savick transport to the planet, and they find the Genesis device has resurrected Spock in the form of a child, although his mind is not present. Marcus eventually admits that he used an unstable proto-matter in the development of the Genesis device. This is causing Spock to age rapidly, and the planet is aging rapidly as well. Spock and the planet, they're kind of interconnected. When he has a growth spurt, the planet is, there's volcanoes and whatnot going off, and the storms is getting up, and the planet is going to tear itself to shreds in a matter of hours, essentially. So they have to get Enterprise there to get Spock, and the whole mission is basically to find Spock, get him to Vulcan, where they can do the Vulcan ritual, I'm trying to recall the name of it. Valtorpan. It's something like that. Crazy mad words that the Star Trek universe has. I have trouble remembering some of them. But, basically it's, get McCoy and Spock to Vulcan, and all this is happening. It's against Starfleet's wishes, so Kirk has put his whole career in the line, and everybody that's on Enterprise are on the line too. When they get to the Genesis planet, the Klingons turn up, of course. Krug, played by the epic Christopher Lloyd. Doc Brown himself is a Klingon in this movie, and he is absolutely fantastic. He takes David Savick and the young Spock hostage. Spock, he's now heading into his teenage years at this point in the movie, and Enterprise turns up. Of course, the Klingon warship is cloaked, and it decloaks, takes one shot at Enterprise, one torpedo, and disables Enterprise in one shot. Because of the way Scotty has it all wired up to be, controlled by a couple of people on the bridge. They basically are lucky enough to hit the main control point of this whole setup. Takes Enterprise out completely. She's a sitting duck in space, nose to nose with this Klingon border prey, and the back and forth starts. And Krug wants the secret to the Genesis planet. If he gets a new Genesis device, it'll be the most destructive weapon in the face of the planet. So while him and Kirk are going at it to and fro from one ship to the other on the view screens, Krug orders one of the hostages to be killed, and he doesn't care which one. So a random Klingon comes up and he looks over all the hostages. You've got Savick, you've got David, and you've got Spock, and he goes for Savick, but David jumps to try and defend her, and he winds up getting killed. So back up in space, Kirk discovers that his son, that he literally only found out that he had in the previous movie, which at this point couldn't be any more than a couple of weeks, maybe a month at tops. And there's a brilliant part whenever he finds out, and again, this is coming from memory. This could be completely false, but I'm almost sure I heard it somewhere. But when he was directed, when Shatner was directed to react to finding out that David had been killed, he was supposed to slump down into the captain's chair. But of course, as we all know, see in the movie, he goes to go back for the captain's chair and he misses it and slides off it and falls to the floor. Now, that is one of these times within a movie that it just, that's the sort of stuff that you can't script. Like, I think if that was in the script, go to sit down in the seat, miss it, slide down. I think from the little experience I have had over the years with creating videos and projects here and there, a couple of short films and whatnot, I think when things like that are actually scripted and the actors are trying to do it, it's not that they can't do it convincingly, but I think whenever something like this happens where it's a genuine mishap, but the actor is professional enough to actually just keep going with it, like a lot of people I've seen in the past, when I've been directing something and something doesn't just go the way that I was looking for, but at the same time, from the director's standpoint, this could work, sort of thing. And the majority of times people make that little mishap and they'll break character and actually look for the director. But Shatner in this moment continued it on, played the scene out basically the way they wanted it done, but that was the only difference. But I think that had so much more of an impact. So, to get back to the movie, this is the heartbreaking part of the movie for a lot of fans. And even my brother has been known to not get emotional, but he's just like, this is just something I hate seeing in this movie. He was like, he is 10 years older than me, 10 or 11 years older than me. So he has, well, he wouldn't remember it being on TV, but he remembers the syndication, the replays on TV of Star Trek a lot longer than I did. And by the time we got to Star Trek 3, the Enterprise, before we even finished the original series, the Enterprise was as much a character in the show as any of the actors. And in the movie here, to beat the Klingons, Kirk decides to put the Enterprise in self-destruct, and there's a landing party going to beam to the Enterprise. Kirk says, give me a few minutes and we'll beam, you beam the party on, we'll beam to your ship as prisoners, sort of a deal. But the landing party, Kirk beams out of the Enterprise, the landing party beams in and go to the bridge, and they're all, confused, and there's no crew here. And of course they hear the computer counting down, which is, and in all fairness, it has to be the dumbest Klingon in the history of Star Trek. Like, this guy is on the bridge of the Enterprise. There's not a sinner to be seen. They've walked the whole way from the transporter room, haven't met anybody. That should be warning enough something's not right here. They get to the bridge, there's nobody on it either, and the computer's counting down, it's like 7, 6, 5. So of course he just goes over. Like, the other guys that's there with him, they're not much better. You walk on to the bridge of something and something's counting down, you're going like, oh shit, let's get the hell out of here. But it's like, he's on the communicator to Krug, and he's like, there's only one thing speaking. Excuse me. And then of course he leans over in his nonchalant sort of way, and Krug hears the timer, and he's like, get out of there. And then of course we get the sequence of Enterprise getting blown up, and a big difference from any of the other Star Trek shows and whatnot. Like, I've seen quite a few ships over the years, falling victim to the self-destruct, but it's usually the warp core that goes up. But I suppose whenever you think about it chronologically, this is probably the first time that it was done in this movie. I can't recall in the original series offhand, and I did watch the entire series there about 3 years ago, but I can't recall a starship, and there's plenty of ships destroyed over the year, but it's. But anyway, Enterprise, pretty much it's the dish that explodes, and it's gone, and the only thing that's left is the neck and the body of the Enterprise. The two nacelles is there, and she goes into a nosedive into the atmosphere of Genesis, and then of course on the planet we see Kirk and McCoy and Scotty all looking up, and you're seeing this here streak of fire going across like a shooting star. And Kirk's like, oh my god, Bones, what have we done? And he's like, it's the same thing you always do, you turn death into a fighting chance to live. And that's pretty much it. They go on their merry way to try and find Spock. Now, what I was hoping for it'll happen whenever they were on the surface and they're looking up and they see that fireball going across the sky, I wanted Scotty to beam in there a wee bit better. Beam in. I wanted him to get in there with something, because, and even that he didn't, that's, I think if there had been a bit more of an emotional resonance in Scotty's face in that sequence, like, this is the ship, this is the ship, it's, people will argue the point that the Enterprise from the original series and the movie Enterprise up until Star Trek 3 are not the same ship. Two totally different ships, but it is essentially the same frame with a different body on it. You know, it's just been... That's like what I did with my car over the last 2 weeks. Like, she was shafted. Like, if I didn't do something to that there, she would be in the scrapyard right now. But we tore out half the engine, put some new stuff in there, put four new tyres on it, and she's like a brand new car. So that's where, you know, but this is the ship that quite a few times over the years you've seen Kirk almost in tears over it. You've seen Scotty starting a fight with more Klingons than he can handle because they insulted the Enterprise. But in the movie here, he's just kind of staring up into the sky watching this thing going across. I would like to have seen, for me, what would have made it, that scene, even if Scotty didn't say something, what would have made it for me is if they played the scene exactly the way they did it, and Kirk and McCoy have their back and forth, but Scotty's in the background and you see a single tear rolling down the cheek, but he doesn't say anything because he's a Starfleet officer and he can't. Kirk is Admiral at this point, and even if he was still the rank of Captain, you know, what the higher ranks is goes, and that's probably the best way that scene could have played out. A single tear on Scotty's cheek. And now that I've went through that whole rigmarole stuff, I need to go and check that movie again and see, maybe there is a little tear, or maybe just a little inkling of him welling up. But anyway, basically from there we go across, they find Saavik and the Klingons and Spock, and then we get into the final showdown with the Klingons, and Krug, he beams down to the planet after he beams the hostages and the Klingons up to the ship, and him and Kirk have their final confrontation face to face on the planet, and it's pretty much give and take for a good part of the fight. But and something I did really like about the end of this movie is what Kirk does when he eventually gets to the Klingon cruiser. He wins the fight. Krug, he falls into the lava fields of the volcanoes and stuff that's gone off, and basically the whole planet is ripping itself to shreds around them throughout the fight. It's a great sequence. And Spock is still on the surface at this stage too, and Kirk gets a communicator, calls for the beam up, and they get to the ship, and there's this Klingon on the bridge, and Kirk says, you know, get him into the brig sort of thing, and the Klingon's like, I do not deserve to love, and he's like, fine, I'll kill you later, and that's it, off he goes. And they work out how to a funny sequence between Scotty and Sulu. And the funny sequence with those two trying to work out the controls of the bird of prey, and the whole planet below them's getting ready to explode. They eventually get it, off they go, and of course, end of the film, we get Kirk and the crew waiting to see what happens, and then the ceremony starts, and McCoy and Spock are lying like next to each other, and the priestess, she comes out and she puts the hands on the two of them. They get through the ritual that transfers Spock's Catra out of McCoy's head and back into his own. So yep, at the end of the movie, pretty much Kirk and Spock have a moment together, and Spock, he's like, you know, my father tells me you came back to save me, and he starts quoting lines from the end of Star Trek 2, I have been and I shall be your friend, sort of thing. The memories is slowly starting to come back, He's like, why did you do it? Why did you come back from me? And Kirk is like, because sometimes the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. Then we get finally the last thing in the movie, brilliant piece, is Spock doing the eyebrow raise at the very end of it, and film closes out there. Basically, this is a great movie. For me, it's right up there with Star Trek 2. The Wrath of Khan, like I've said it in the last episode, I find it really difficult to judge between these two movies. I absolutely love the two of them. The only difference in saying that is, like I said, with Star Trek 2, your average Joe could roll up onto that movie, sit down and watch it and really enjoy it for what it is. And I don't think that's the case for Star Trek 3. I think Star Trek 3, you need to have that connection of Star Trek to enjoy it for what it is. And for me, Enterprise getting destroyed every time. That sequence is absolutely amazing, and a lot more of a connection with that to jump way ahead. You've got the Kelvin timeline movie where everything is just kind of like mirror imaged of what happened before, but they got to Star Trek Beyond, the third movie in their run. They decided they were going to destroy their Enterprise, simply because it's the third film and the Enterprise gets destroyed in the third film, historically. And for me, that Enterprise just didn't have the same kind of emotional response from me that Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, had, because again, as I say, this is the ship that carried these guys throughout the 3 seasons of the original run, plus if you take into account the animated series, and 4 seasons worth of Star Trek, and then we get 2 movies, and then the third one. It's like losing a member of the family, basically. But that was a bit of a tangent to finish it out. It's a great movie. I absolutely love it, guys. And if you haven't seen Star Trek, you need to watch it. You really do. And if you're still listening to this podcast at this point, you're absolute gems, legends. I talk an utter epic amount of garbage at the best of times, and I don't script these things whatsoever. If I need to get hold of some information, I jump onto the internet and have that Google search and pull up some of the facts that I need to get for it. But the lifelong Star Wars, sacrilege, lifelong Star Trek fan. Not the sort of hardcore fan that you would see going to conventions and whatnot, but the great thing about classic Star Trek, the original series, Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, all those shows, they were great at just getting out of your head for a while and just, getting yourself into another universe out there, and another time, and a vision of the future of what the human race could be instead of like new Star Trek. Even though I do enjoy it, it is very preachy right now, especially that 3rd season of Discovery, but we'll eventually get to that at some point. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please give me a little what way does it work with podcast? Do you have the thumbs up? I'm not sure. Anyway, give me a little rating review over on iTunes, and share it along to your science fiction friends, because, as I've said a few times throughout these episodes, it's not all going to be about Star Trek. There's a crap load of other stuff that I'm checking out at the minute that will be a part of this at some point. But we'll get into that stuff after we do the run of the movies. So, I'll talk to you in the next episode. This has been a production of Coins Edge Media. Check out my social media links in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening.